Hello and welcome to this tutorial. So I hope you enjoyed watching the premiere of the hierarchical clustering results and that you took the time to analyze them to either compare them to the k-means result if you followed the k-means section, or if you did not do the k-means section before, then it's great if you took the time to understand what those clusters are. Okay, so now let's look at the clusters one by one. So the cluster 1 is this red cluster here, and customers in this cluster have high income and low spending score. But remember, all the customers in the dataset are customers that subscribe to the membership card and are also customers who come often to the mall. So that means that these customers, although they have high income and come often to the mall, they don't spend much money in the mall. So in the k-means section we call these customers careful customers because they're careful with the money they're spending even if they earn a lot. Okay, so now the second cluster is the cluster in the middle, the blue cluster, and the customers in this cluster have average income and average spending score. So we call this cluster standard customers. Then cluster 3 is the green cluster here, and it contains customers that have high income and high spending score. So that's a very interesting cluster for the mall because customers in this cluster have a lot of money and they like spending their money in the mall. So typically this would be the cluster of customers target of the marketing campaigns because it's the most interesting cluster of customers for the mall. However, of course, we would need to check the volumes of the two clusters, target and standard, because maybe there are a lot more customers in the standard cluster, which then would imply that the main revenue stream comes from this cluster of customers, the standard cluster. So we would need to check that, but so far these are the first insights that we can give. And it would be very interesting for the mall to see what kind of products are bought by the customers in this cluster to maybe allocate more budget on these marketing campaigns for these products. Okay, and now cluster 4. Cluster 4 is the cyan cluster on the up left corner. So this cluster contains the customers that have low income but high spending score. And so these customers are maybe not very careful with the money they spend. And so we call them the careless customers. It can be, for example, young people who just had their first salary and they're so excited about that so they cannot resist to spend their whole monthly salary in the mall. And finally, the final cluster, cluster 5. So here customers in this cluster have a low income and a low spending score. So this time these customers are more sensible because they manage their money as they should. So we call this cluster of customers sensible. And so now you could totally show this plot in a presentation and give the insights that we just talked about. Okay, so we're very close to the end of the Python tutorials for hierarchical clustering. The only thing that I want to show you now is how you can reuse this code for your business problem. So that's very simple. You just have to change the name of your dataset here, and then you change the indexes of your columns of interest because maybe you will need more columns of interest. And then you're good to go. You just have to select this code and execute it, and you will have your results. But be careful. If you are doing clustering in more than 2 dimensions, then don't execute the last code section here because it's only for plotting the clusters in 2 dimensions. However, later in this course, we will see a super powerful technique that will allow us to reduce the dimensions of our dataset. So for example, if we're doing a clustering analysis with more than 2 dimensions, we will be able to reduce the number of dimensions to 2 dimensions. And in that case, you can select this last code section here, visualizing the clusters, to see your clusters in 2 dimensions. Okay, so that's the end of this section on hierarchical clustering with Python. Thank you for watching these tutorials, and I look forward to seeing you either in the following R tutorials if you're interested in R, or in the next section of this course. Until then, happy learning!